Welcome back, everybody. We're doing another deep dive today. And this time we're going to be looking at, well, I think one of the most interesting parts of Arcane, really, and that's the whole idea of father figures.
Yeah.
They're not just like background characters, right? They're really like driving forces for so many of the characters and
Yeah.
how they develop and everything.
Yeah, it's really more than just saying like, oh, this person's a good or bad father, right? It's more about like how Arcane uses those figures to explore like some deeper things about the world, like what does it mean? What does it really mean to protect the people you care about in a city like Zon that's,
Yeah, right.
so messed up and how does ambition kind of like clash with tradition when you're trying to make progress?
Exactly. So we got a whole bunch of stuff, character analyses and all these deep dives into relationships. And we even got some pretty heavy think pieces about, the whole world of Arcane.
Oh, yeah.
So where do we even start?
Yeah. Well, I think a good place to start is with Vander, right? I mean, he's like the heart of Zon, I feel like. He's the protector, especially for Ven and Powder when they, lose their parents. I mean, this is a guy who will, throw down for his community, but at the same time, he's still like haunted by, all the violence in his past.
Yeah, and that's what makes him so interesting, right? Like, he's not just some tough guy. He's really trying to break free from all that violence in Zon, and obviously when he dies, that's a huge turning point for both of them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it sends them down two totally different paths, and it's like you can see how Vander's death leads to Vin's whole thing about responsibility, right? About protecting everyone. It's like she took his lessons about family and like looking after the people who need it, and she just made them her own,
Totally. But then there's Powder, right, who ends up becoming Jinx.
Yeah.
Like, how does Vander's death shape her path, especially when she gets mixed up with Silco?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. I mean, Silco, he's like a father figure in the weirdest way possible, right?
Right, okay.
He sees Powder's pain, he sees her genius, but also how much potential she has for, just wreaking havoc, and well, he just kind of rolls with it.
Yeah, it's almost like he uses her grief and her anger to make her, into this force of chaos.
Yeah.
But there's also that weird, like, sense of care there. It's like a twisted kind of love, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what makes Silco so fascinating, right? He's not just some evil bad guy. He really thinks he's doing what's best for Jinx,
right,
even though the way he goes about it is, well, pretty messed up.
So it begs the question, like, how is Silco's way of being a father, quote unquote, so different from Vander's? And what does that say about Zon as a whole?
That's the big question, right? I mean, Vander, he represents hope. He wants a peaceful future for Zon. But he ends up getting taken down by the very thing he's trying to fight. And then you have Silco, who just thrives in all that chaos. He uses it to get power and control, right?
Yeah, and Jinx is caught right in the middle of those two forces, isn't she?
Yeah.
Like, Vander's love was all about protecting her.
Oh, yeah.
And keeping her safe. But then Silco's love is, well, it's possessive and maybe even, I don't know, manipulative.
Totally. And that's what makes her such a great character,
Yeah.
That constant struggle.
Right.
Trying to figure out what those two very different father figures mean to her.
It's like she's trying to put together a puzzle.
Yeah.
Where the pieces don't actually fit together.
Right.
And then, of course, we have Jace and Heimerdinger, who are kind of a different father-son thing altogether, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's more like a mentor-student relationship,
yes.
right? It's all about, the clash between ambition and experience.
Right.
Like Heimerdinger, he's got centuries of knowledge and tradition behind him.
Yeah.
And then you got Jace, who, bless his heart, he's all about pushing boundaries and kind of shaking things up a bit. It's like watching a prodigy trying to outshine his master, even though he's still got so much to learn.
And that causes a lot of tension between them, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like when Jace decides to kick Heimerdinger off the council.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big moment for both of them.
Totally. And it makes you think, is that what progress looks like, or is it a mistake?
Right.
Like Arcane really makes you ask those tough questions.
So what you're saying is whether it's Vander protecting everyone or Silco kind of, manipulating things from the shadows, or Heimerdinger with all his wisdom, they're not just there to like move the story along.
Right.
They're like, they represent different parts of Zon and Piltover, different ways of thinking and living.
Exactly. And through them, Arcane shows us how much father figures, good or bad, can really shape people, shape their identity, their ambitions, even the fate of the cities themselves.
And this is just the beginning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, we've only just started to scratch the surface of this stuff.
Oh, yeah. There's so much more to unpack.
This is already getting me thinking in ways I hadn't before.
It's fascinating stuff, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well,
You know, it's it's amazing how they use those father figures to, like, explore not just the characters themselves, but like the whole vibe of Zahn and Piltover,
oh, yeah.
you know? It's like they represent all the hopes and fears of both cities.
That's a good point. And it really comes out when you compare Vander and Silco,
Right.
like how they try to protect what's important to them. Vander, with his whole thing about community and unity, he's like this idealistic vision of Zahn.
Right. He wants things to get better, but not if it means hurting innocent people.
Exactly. But Silco, he's all about working in the shadows. He thinks the only way to protect Zahn is through power, even if it means getting violent and manipulating people.
Right, right. And that's really clear in how they influence V and Jinx, right?
Absolutely. Like, think about it. Via, she's all about Vander's selflessness. She becomes this protector fighting for the people who can't fight for themselves. She even joins the Enforcers, which is kind of ironic, right?
Yeah.
Because they're part of the system that Vander was fighting against. It's like she's carrying his legacy, but in this really complex way.
Yeah, yeah. It makes you wonder, like, is she trying to make Vander's dream of a better Zahn come true, even if it means working within a system that's kind of messed up?
That's a really interesting thought. And then you have Jinx, who's like the embodiment of Silco's chaos.
Right.
All that destruction, her brilliance, her paranoia, it all comes from Silco. He's the one who shows her that power comes from embracing the darkness inside.
It's kind of sad, really, because you can see parts of Vander in Jinx, especially in the beginning. But then losing him and Silco kind of messing with her head, it pushes her down this dark path.
Yeah, and it's not just Vea and Jinx who are affected by them. The whole city of Zahn is caught between Vander's, like, idealism and Silco's,
Yeah.
pragmatism. Remember that scene where Silco says Zahn needs to be feared, not pitied?
Oh, yeah.
That's like his whole philosophy in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what Vander believed in.
Totally. It's like Arcane is asking us which way is better for Zahn, right?
Yeah.
Strength through unity, like Vander wanted, or power through fear, like Silco. And is there even a way to, like, combine those two things?
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is, and people are still debating it, which I think is awesome. It shows how smart the show is that it doesn't give you easy answers.
Right, right. So let's talk about Jason Heimerdinger for a second.
Okay.
Their relationship is more about, like, mentorship and passing down knowledge.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a father-son kind of vibe there, too, don't you
Oh,
think?
totally. Heimerdinger, with all his experience and wisdom, he's like a father figure to Jace. He sees Jace's potential, his brilliance, but also how reckless he can be, and he tries to guide him, tell him to be more careful.
But Jace is, well, he's Jace, right? He's so ambitious and headstrong that he doesn't always listen to Heimerdinger.
Right. He's so focused on progress, on this future where magic and technology can work together, that he forgets the lessons of the past.
It's that whole thing about the old generation and the new generation clashing.
Exactly. The mentor trying to teach the student, and the student just brushing him off like he's out of touch.
And it makes you think, what if Jace had actually listened? Would things have been different?
Good question. Would he have made fewer mistakes?
Right.
Would Piltover have been better off?
It's like one of the main themes of Arcane, progress versus tradition.
Totally. Jace is all about innovation, thinking that science can solve everything. And Heimerdinger is there to remind him that even the best intentions can backfire.
Then their relationship is kind of like Zahn and Piltover.
Oh, yeah, totally. Both cities want a better future. But they have completely different ideas about how to get there.
And that causes a lot of problems, as we see in the show.
Big time. It's like those father figures, those mentors. They're like mini versions of the bigger conflicts happening in Arcane.
Yeah, they represent the hopes and fears of the cities, and their influence, good or bad, shapes everyone and everything.
Exactly. And that's something to keep in mind while you're watching. Because these personal relationships between fathers and children, mentors and students, they're actually reflecting bigger things happening in society and politics.
Wow, that's deep.
It is. And when you understand that, you can really appreciate how complex and nuanced Arcane is.
It's so much more than just saying, oh, he's a good dad or he's a bad influence. It's about how they represent different ways of looking at the world.
Right. Different ideas about power and responsibility. And, there's another layer to this whole father figure thing that we haven't even talked about yet.
What's that?
The impact of them not being there.
Oh, you're right. It's not just about the fathers who are present. It's also about the ones who are missing.
Exactly. And those absences can be just as important, you know?
Yeah, like with Jinx, right? Losing Vander is what really changes her. It creates this emptiness inside her, and Silco takes advantage of that.
Yeah, he steps right in.
And it's not just Jinx. So many characters in Arcane are dealing with not having a strong, positive father figure in their lives.
Like Kavai, she's always trying to live up to Vander's expectations, even though he's gone.
And Powder, or Jinx, I guess,
Yeah.
she's looking for someone to replace Vander, which is how she ends up with Silco.
Yeah. He accepts her, even though it's in this messed up way, and it fills the hole that Vander left.
It shows that these characters aren't just driven by their own desires,
Yeah.
They're shaped by the relationships they have or don't have with the people who are supposed to be looking after them.
And that brings us back to influence. Whether it's Vander being nurturing or Silco manipulating things or just having no father figure at all, these things have a huge impact on the characters. And it makes us, as viewers, think about relationships and how they affect the world.
I'm already seeing things in the show that I missed before just by thinking about it this way.
That's great. It's like we're peeling back the layers of Arcane and seeing how deep it really goes.
Yeah, and it's all thanks to these father figures who are such a big part of the story.
Exactly. And to go even deeper, let's look at some specific moments in the show.
Yeah.
Because sometimes just one scene, one line of dialogue can tell you so much about the characters and their relationships with their father figures.
Okay, so we've talked about, the big picture stuff, the different types of father figures and the different ideas they represent and how all that plays out in the cities. Now let's get into the details, the moments that really make these ideas clear.
Sounds good. What do you have in mind?
Well, I can't stop thinking about Vander's death.
Hmm.
It's obviously brutal, but it's also so powerful. It's not just a turning point in the story. It's like Vander's legacy is literally being passed on to Vi.
Yeah, that's so true. When he tells Vi to protect Powder, it's like he's giving her his whole,
Right.
philosophy, everything he believes in, the responsibility for protecting the people he loves. It's all on Vi's shoulders now.
And you can see how much those words affect her. Throughout the whole show, she's trying to keep that promise,
Yeah.
even though the world is getting crazier and more dangerous.
Right. And think about that scene from Powder's perspective.
Oh, yeah?
She sees Vander die, this huge sacrifice, but she also blames herself for it, She's the one who set off the explosion that started the fight with Silco's gang.
Exactly. And that guilt, that feeling that it was her fault, it becomes a huge part of who she is. It drives her crazy, turns her into Jinx.
Yeah, and that's where Silco comes in, right? He sees that guilt, that she's vulnerable, and he uses it. Like, remember when he comforts Powder after she accidentally kills Milo and Clagger?
Uh-huh.
It's creepy how he whispers, "You're perfect," while she's falling apart.
It's so messed up, but it also works.
Yeah.
He's giving her the approval she wants, but he's also making her believe that she's broken,
Yeah.
that she's only good at destroying things.
And that's the sad thing about the relationship. Silco's love for Jinx is real, but it's also hurting her. He encourages her dark side, her anger, because he thinks that's the only way she can survive in Zon.
Right. And then there's Jace deciding to remove Heimerdinger from the council. It's heartbreaking to watch because, he respects Heimerdinger and wants his guidance.
Yeah.
But he's also so ambitious that he can't see how wise Heimerdinger is in being cautious.
It's like when the student thinks he knows more than the master,
Right.
but it doesn't end well.
Right.
Jace wants progress so badly that he cuts off the one person who could have helped him avoid making mistakes.
And it's not just about these individual moments, right?
Right.
It's about how all these little interactions add up over time and how they affect the character's beliefs and choices.
Yeah.
Vander's sacrifice inspires Vale to become a protector, but it also gives her this impossible job. Silco twists Jinx's view of herself, making her into this weapon of chaos. And Jace rejecting Heimerdinger's wisdom makes him, makes him want power too much and makes him think every problem has a quick solution.
Right. It's like those father figures, those mentors, they're always shaping the characters, molding them into the heroes and villains they become.
So what does it all mean? What can we take away from how Arcane shows fatherhood? I think for me, it shows that these relationships are never easy. They're complicated, and they have a big impact on who we are.
Absolutely. And it's not just about fathers, It's about anyone who takes on that role, like a mentor, a guide, someone who's looking out for you.
Yeah. And those relationships can be good or bad.
Right.
They can give you strength and love, but they can also hurt you and manipulate you.
And Arcane shows both sides really well. It shows the bad stuff, how people can abuse their power, and how good intentions can still mess things up.
But it also shows that even when things are really bad, there can be real connection and love and sacrifice.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
think Arcane ultimately shows us how important these relationships are, even if they're not perfect. And it makes us think about how we want to influence the world, you know, as parents, as mentors, as friends.
That's a great point. Arcane is about so much more than just magic and technology and revolution. It's about people, about the things that connect us and the choices we make that affect everyone.
This has been amazing. I feel like I understand the show on a whole new level now. I'm going to be looking for those father-figure dynamics when I watch it again.
Me too. And I bet our listeners will too. Once you start looking for them, you realize how important they are to the story.
Yeah, it's like we found this secret code, a new way to understand the characters and why they do what they do.
And it's all because of these really complex, really interesting father figures in Arcane.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See ya.